welcome to London. Today we are going to talk about the cost differences between visiting London and visiting New York. But first, I've got John here. John, introduce yourself.
Thank you so much, Jess, for having me. My name's John Barr. I've been a creator here in New York City for 7 years, lived here a dozen years. I've covered just about every major attraction, many neighborhoods, many different types of foods. And we've got everything here.
Okay, so let's talk about cost. We're gonna go through some of the big costs that you spend when you travel, and we'll compare how much it costs in London versus New York. And then at the end, we're gonna say which city is more expensive to visit. You ready?
I'm ready to rock.
Let's go.
All right, first up, hotels. And this is the biggest upfront expense of your trip. And where you stay, it's gonna set the vibe for the rest of your trip.
Oh yeah, so in London, we're seeing that the average hotel price for one night for a double occupancy is around £248, or about $308, which kind of makes sense.
Versus versus $330 or 265 pounds per night in New York.
So it's a little bit more by those averages here in New York, but I would say that hotel rooms in New York are much smaller than in London.
Our hotels are famously tiny. I did a video once about the Jane Hotel. I think I barely had enough room to stretch my arms out. It was that tiny, it had bunk beds. These things exist only in New York.
So let's say, for the sake of the argument, that we're gonna talk about hotels that are in Midtown New York, which is very central, very touristy New York, as you know, and Covent Garden in London, which is also super central and where a lot of tourists end up staying. So we had a look at a couple of hotel options in Covent Garden, one that is on the higher end of the mid-range options and one that is more affordable but still pretty decent. For your standard August weekend dates, which is peak season, the more expensive option is going for around £400 a night, and the more affordable one was around £280 a night, including all taxes and fees. Of course, prices do fluctuate a lot depending on the season and if there's some special event or holiday happening. For example, around Christmas time, the more expensive hotel was going for around £560 a night, and the lower end one was around $300, $310. So yeah, it completely depends on what time of year you're coming to the city, but also which area you want to stay in.
We took a look at a couple of hotels in Midtown Manhattan at the mid-range level, and there's quite a difference even between a random August weekend and Labor Day weekend. For a summer weekend, you're looking at around $380 to $460 per night, depending on the hotel. Mid-range, that goes up to $450 to $550 on Labor Day weekend. And during Christmas, if you want to stay at the Plaza Hotel right behind me, probably the most famous in New York City, because Kevin McAllister stayed there during Home Alone 2, over $1,000 a night. But getting more realistic, you could spend on average $400 to $600 a night. Now, those prices do include fees and taxes, but if you book on certain websites, they even add on extra fees, so be really careful what websites you book on, and also check if there's resort fees. Make sure, if you're gonna be paying for them, that you know about them in advance, because they're becoming more and more common in New York City these days, and a lot of my viewers have complained about them.
The thing about London, though, which is great, is that you can actually make some adjustments to get that average hotel price down. You could stay further from the center and still find pretty good hotels. You can go for less luxurious places, very budget places. Hostels are great in London, so you can make adjustments if you are on a budget and don't want to pay that much for a hotel.
I mean, New York, it's just about the same story. Stay in downtown Brooklyn, stay in Long Island City, Queens. The savings are going to be tremendous, and we also do have hostels in New York.
Oh, I didn't know that.
There are. They're mostly uptown, though.
Okay. And I'm staying in Long Island City for this trip. I actually love it there. It's really easy to get into Manhattan. So.
Yes, good call.
So in general, hotels are cheaper in London versus New York. Okay, let's talk about public transport.
And in New York City, I think too many tourists fear the subway system, and I'm sure it's the same with the tube in London, right?
Yeah, exactly. But it's actually a great way to get around both cities in an affordable way, and also once you do it a couple times, you just kind of get the hang of it.
I think pretty easy, even for a first-timer.
In London, you'll pay for public transportation either with a contactless debit or credit card, Apple Pay or Google Pay, or if you don't have those options, you can get an Oyster card. Basically, the further that you travel on your journey or the more zones that you travel through, the more that you're going to pay. However, most tourists tend to stick to the very center of London, which is zones 1 and 2. Now, it's important that when you're paying for public transport in London, you use the same card and the same payment method every time that you tap in and out of the system or go onto a bus. And that's because there's this thing called a daily cap. It basically means for the zones that you have traveled to, there is a max that you're gonna pay for the day, and any rides you take after that are gonna be completely free. So if you stay in zones 1 to 2, you're only gonna pay up to £8.10 for your rides for the entire day. And for the whole week, it's £40.70. And don't worry, if this is all really confusing and you're like, these are way too many numbers, I'm not gonna remember this, you don't have to. This is all automatically calculated for you on whatever payment method that you use, so you're good to go.
New York's a bit simpler for this one. We've just added contactless payment with something called Omni. Now, this is not an app. All you need is any phone that has contactless payment enabled. Put your phone up to the reader and away you go. There is a flat rate per ride of $2.75, and it doesn't matter how far you go. New York City has no zones. You can go from the top of the Bronx all the way to southern Brooklyn on one fare. You can also get a 7-day unlimited card for $33 or a 30-day unlimited for $127.
And then we've got taxis.
Taxis are, for one, super iconic to take in New York City, and they're also many times cheaper than Lyfts and Ubers because there's never any surge pricing.
Black cabs in London are also iconic, but they actually are usually a lot more expensive than taking like an Uber or the equivalent app that you can use to get a taxi. However, the price of Ubers are starting to go up more too, so they're both okay options.
So we're gonna give New York the win here for transportation costs, just a little bit cheaper.
Quick break from my time with John to let you know that if it's your first time visiting London, I have a free London trip checklist, which has everything you need to do, buy, and book before your big trip to London and when you need to do it by. So to get that completely for free, click the link in the description box of this video. Okay, back to the comparisons. Attractions. Okay, so it's kind of hard to give you some comparisons for attractions and things to do because there's loads of different things at different price points, but we'll give you some ideas.
So in terms of some really famous attractions, the Statue of Liberty is going to cost you $31 to go up to the pedestal. The Empire State Building is one of the most popular attractions, not just in New York City, but the entire world. Now, $44 gets you in the door to the 86th floor. I personally think that's enough. Summit One Vanderbilt, which is my personal favorite, $42. Now, if you're looking for an underrated observation deck, Top of the Rock, $40, gets the least amount of people, and I think has some of the best views in all of Midtown Manhattan.
In London, the Tower of London costs £29.50 per adult, and the London Eye costs £30.50 per adult. But I have a great free alternative that's actually higher than the London Eye that I talk about in this video popping up right here, so go watch that after you finish this video. In London, most of our major museums and galleries are completely free to visit. Just be sure to leave a little donation to say thank you and to help with the upkeep. We also have lots of smaller, more niche museums that are definitely worth a visit that do come with an entrance fee, but it's usually not too much.
Well, as you probably already know, New York is such a museum and art gallery kind of a town. The Met, $30 for admission. It's actually the most expensive museum in New York City, but one of the best museums in the entire world, in my opinion. Then you have the American Museum of Natural History, $28, and those are the most visited in all of New York. Most first-time tourists will at least knock out one of them.
Generally, going to the theater here in London is going to be cheaper than going in New York. According to the Society of London Theatre, the average theater ticket price is £48.
Theater is very expensive in New York. Even on the lowest end, it's about $65. You know, both cities do have TKTS booths, which you can go to get discounted tickets for that night's shows. But Broadway and theater in general is always something you're gonna have to leave some budget on the side for, and it's definitely worth it in New York City. Overall, I would say London is a little bit cheaper for attractions, but the really big ones, it's about the same.
Yeah. And now we're on to one of my favorite topics, food. I think London has the best food in the world, but...
Well, I might disagree, but you're entitled to your opinion.
Sit down casual?
Well, on the cheaper end, I would say approximately $25 a person with tax, which is 8.625, and tip, which I would say 20% for good service on top of your pre-tax total at a restaurant in New York, similarly for a good lunch special.
In London, I would say it's about 15 to 30 pounds per person for like a lower level restaurant, getting a little bit more into the mid-range. And we don't do the tipping quite like you guys do. It's usually included in the bill at 12.5%, and tax is already included in all the prices you see.
That is something a lot of my foreign viewers do complain about, is tipping in the US. I get it. All right, my turn. What about sit-down formal in London?
So, starts about 40 pounds per person, not including drinks, and then can go, basically the sky is the limit. But I would say average, if you're looking at a nice place, 40 to 50 pounds per person.
Similar in New York, maybe even more expensive, $60 a person. If you're not including alcohol, easily $100 a person with a few rounds mixed in, and we're talking pre-tip. It can be very expensive to eat out in New York if you're going to the higher end spots.
What about the more like traditional New York kind of food that you have to get?
For the really iconic stuff in New York City, the stuff you see in all the movies and TV shows, actually one thing New York's really good about is prices on that stuff. Bagel with cream cheese, only $3, I'd say. Even a decent slice of pizza, we're not talking the dollar pizza, we're talking decent slice, $3 to $4. So budget bites in New York is something that they really do well.
I agree. London, it's a mix. Some of the more traditional stuff like Sunday roast, that can be 20 pounds per person and up. Afternoon tea, that's a big one that tourists always want to do. That's going to run you at least 40 pounds per person. But then you have also more of the street food style stuff like fish and chips. You can usually get that for around 11 pounds or even less. And we've got like pie and mash. You can get that from anywhere from 5 pounds to 10 pounds. So it's a mix, really.
What's pie and mash?
Traditional pie with usually it's steak and ale on the inside, and then mash is mashed potatoes.
Sounds good. I do think that New York wins on the cheap eat scene. It wins over a lot of North American cities. I will say we have Dollar Pizza, we've got Chinatown, which we're gonna get to. We even have local bodegas and delis getting like $7 sandwiches the size of your head. Yeah, in New York, you can eat cheap.
I think, though, if you're eating out at more regular restaurants, you're going to end up spending more because of tax and tip, and it's just a little bit more expensive.
With the exception of Chinatown.
Yes.
Which we're about to show you.
Exactly. And we'll give New York the point for this one.
Okay. We'll take it. I really wanted to further emphasize the cheap eat scene in New York. We're in Chinatown, Manhattan right now. I've got a special guest who's also filming this video, Ben from the Bing Buzz. He's absolutely my insider for all things Chinatown. And here, I still think $10 or $20 can go so far.
That's so true, John and Jess. You could get these cute little dessert sponge cake for $1. You could get $3.50 for peanut noodles, $3 fish ball soup. I think it's better in China. You have everything. You have the whole Asia, whole China packed in this half-mile radius.
Finally, let's talk about going out for a drink at the bar or the pub. Obviously, London is really well known for its pub culture and just drinking in general. So something you gotta do if you're into it when you come to London.
Now, obviously, it depends what you're drinking, but in New York, generally a pint of beer will set you back around $7. Now, you can still find dive bars that have $3, tecates or specials and happy hour. Really big deal in New York City, also a great way to drink cheaper.
I do miss happy hour when I'm in London. We don't have it as much there. But I would say for a pint of beer in London, it's about the same, the equivalent of about £5.50. It's getting up there, especially in central London. But a glass of wine in London is usually gonna run you like 6 to 10 pounds, so not too bad.
Important note, our beer in New York, always cold.
Yes, not in London. It's not room temperature. It's just not as cold as it is here in the US.
I'm just trying to find things for your people to jump to comment to. Now in New York, wine, generally by the glass, $10 to $12, not very cheap.
What about cocktails?
So we are right now one of my favorite cocktail bars in all of New York City, the Ivory Peacock. It just opened last year. General New York, I'm thinking 14 to 16 bucks for a good cocktail. Here, $19. So you are paying a premium for the ambiance and definitely for the expertise of the bartenders. If you're spending this much money on a cocktail, you know the bartender knows exactly what they're doing.
Oh yeah, definitely. I would say the same in London. Cocktails are gonna run you from like 10 to 11 pounds all the way up to 19, 20, 21 if you're getting into like the really, really fancy cocktail bars. So, but same thing, paying for the ambiance and for top mixologists from around the world.
And we could agree that both cities have an incredible cocktail scene.
Yeah, oh yeah.
They're both usually on that like top 50 world list.
Yes, and I've drank at a lot of those places, so. So all in all, that makes London a bit cheaper for drinking, unless we're talking about the very cheap beers that you can find at like the dive bars around here.
Basically, yeah. Cheers.
Cheers. Okay, so the analysis is in, and it's cheaper to visit London than it is to visit New York.
But I do think that you pay a price for a premium city, and I think New York is totally a premium city. And a little caveat, we do have cheaper food in New York if you want to do the street food budget angle. So I will give New York the win on that.
And transport's cheaper
Yes.
in New York. But I don't know if I would say it's more premium than London, but
Okay.
You're entitled to your opinion, it's fine. John, thank you so much for being on the channel and doing the video with us. Don't forget, if you're going to New York, John has loads of videos that you can go watch. So we will leave some links in the description box of where you can start watching on his channel. And goodbye from New York.
Goodbye.
And for more tips for your London trip, watch one of our hundreds of other videos that we have. In fact, we have 2 great ones popping up right around me, so click them to watch them next.